Have you ever felt so failed by justice that you decided to become the executioner yourself? I remember the smell of gasoline mixed with the car seat leather. I remember the sound of the liquid falling on his clothes, on his face, on that body that had slept next to mine for 18 years. Marcus was unconscious, drunk as always, slumped in the driver's seat with his mouth open. He was snoring, that snore I had heard 1,000 nights. I poured the last splash of gasoline on him and stepped back. I took the matchbox out of my pocket. My hands weren't trembling. After a year of planning it, or after 8 years of pain, my hands were as steady as rocks. I lit the match. The orange flame illuminated the dark garage. I looked at him one last time and threw it. The fire exploded instantly. The flames engulfed him in seconds. He started screaming. He woke up screaming, trying to open the door, hitting the glass. But I had locked the doors from the outside. I watched him writhe. I watched him burn. I watched him die like he let my son die. And I felt nothing, only emptiness. My name is Denise Jefferson. I am 58 years old, and I have been in this prison for 11 months. Life without parole. Aggravated murder with premeditation and malice. That's what my sentence says. And they are right. I planned it for a year. I waited for the exact moment and executed it without hesitation. I burned my husband alive. I let him die in the most painful way possible. And if I were given the chance to go back, I would do exactly the same. I know you're thinking I'm a monster. A woman capable of burning her husband alive has to be a demon. And maybe I am. Maybe these 11 months in prison have given me enough time to realize that I always had that darkness inside. Or maybe it was put there. Maybe pain can turn anyone into a monster. I thank the owners of this channel for allowing me to record this confession. I know they'll be showered with insults in the comments. I know people will say, "How can you give a voice to a murderer?" But they understand something that many don't, that behind every crime there is a story, and my story needs to be told before I die in here. I ask you something, dear listener. I know the title of this video is strong. I know you came expecting to hear the confession of a madwoman, but I ask you to listen to me completely, not to judge me until you know everything, until you understand what led me to do what I did, and then, if you want to condemn me, go ahead. But give me the opportunity to explain why a woman can decide that burning someone alive is the only possible justice. I was born in a small town in Mississippi. I was the eldest of 3 sisters. My father was a farmer, my mother a homemaker, a humble but close-knit family. I grew up helping on the farm, taking care of my younger sisters, dreaming of leaving town and seeing the world. At 21, I met David. He was from Atlanta. He had come to town to work on road construction. He was handsome, educated, with big dreams. I fell in love with him in 2 weeks. We got married 3 months later. My mother said it was too fast, that I didn't know him well, but I was sure. David was the love of my life. We moved to Atlanta. David worked in construction. I worked in a clothing factory. We didn't have much, but we were happy. 3 years later, Matthew was born, my beautiful boy, the center of my universe. David was a wonderful father. He played with Matthew for hours, read him stories, taught him to ride a bike. We were the perfect family. But life has cruel ways of snatching away happiness. Matthew was 3 years old when David died. It was an accident at the construction site. A poorly secured beam fell on him. He died instantly. He couldn't even say goodbye. One day he was there, and the next they handed me a box with his belongings and an indemnity check. I collapsed. I almost didn't survive that pain, but I had Matthew. My boy needed me. So I took a deep breath and moved on. I worked double. We moved to a smaller apartment, Matthew and I, against the world. Years passed. Matthew grew up healthy, intelligent, affectionate. He was identical to his father. The same eyes, the same smile, the same way of tilting his head when he thought. He was my reason for living. Everything I did was for him, to give him education, opportunities, a better future. When Matthew was 7, I met Marcus. He was a supervisor at the factory where I worked. A big, strong man with a deep voice, 15 years older than me. Divorced, no children. He started courting me, lunch invitations, flowers, attention. At first, I rejected him. I wasn't looking for anything. My life was Matthew and work. But Marcus was persistent. He said he admired me, that I was a brave woman, that I deserved to have someone to take care of me. After a year of persistence, I agreed to go out with him. And little by little, I got used to his presence. He wasn't like David. David was light, laughter, tenderness. Marcus was serious, quiet, practical, but he made me feel safe. He made me feel like I no longer had to carry everything alone. We got married when Matthew was 10. We moved to a bigger house, in a better neighborhood. Marcus earned well. We were able to put Matthew in a private school. We had a car, a comfortable life. I thought things were finally settling down, but there was something I didn't see, something I didn't want to see. Marcus was jealous of Matthew. At first, they were small things, comments. If Matthew asked me for help with homework and I got up from the dinner table, Marcus would frown. If I hugged Matthew, he'd say he was too old for so much pampering. If Matthew wanted to tell me something about his day at school, Marcus would interrupt, saying we had to talk about adult things. I told him he was my son, that it was normal for me to take care of him. He said I spoiled him too much, that I was turning him into a wimp, that he needed a firm hand. We argued about it, but I thought it was normal, that it was hard for him to adapt to being a stepfather. Matthew felt it too. He told me Marcus looked at him strangely, that when I wasn't around, he spoke to him meanly, that he told him he was a bother, that his real dad was dead, period, and he wasn't going to replace him. I told Marcus to be more affectionate with the boy. He promised to try, but things didn't improve. When Matthew turned 12, we built a pool in the backyard. It was Marcus's idea. He said it was a good investment, that the house would appreciate. Matthew loved it. He learned to swim that summer. He spent hours in that pool. One Saturday afternoon, I had gone to the supermarket. Marcus stayed home watching TV. Matthew was doing homework in his room. When I returned an hour later, I found Marcus sitting on the patio with a beer in his hand. I asked him about Matthew. He said he was swimming. I went out to the yard and saw him floating, face down, motionless. I screamed, ran, jumped into the water, pulled him out. He was cold, blue, lifeless. I gave him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation with chest compressions, screaming at him to wake up, not to leave me, that he was all I had left. Marcus called the ambulance. They arrived in 15 minutes. They tried to revive him. They couldn't. Matthew was dead. My 2-year-old boy drowned in his own home's pool. The paramedics said he probably had a cramp, got scared, swallowed water and became disoriented, that it was a tragic but common accident. The police came. They asked routine questions. Marcus told them he was watching TV, that he didn't hear anything, that when he came out, it was already too late. The story checked out. There were no signs of violence. The coroner ruled it accidental death by drowning. We buried Matthew next to David. My whole life went into that grave. I had nothing left, no one left, only Marcus. And Marcus became my lifeline. He held me through those first horrible months, when I couldn't get out of bed, when I cried for hours, when I wanted to die. He was there. He forced me to eat, took me to the psychologist, told me we had to move on, that Matthew would have wanted me to live. Years passed. 8 years. 8 years, surviving with a hole in my chest that never filled. 8 years, dragging myself through this life without my son. 8 years, in which Marcus and I became two strangers, living under the same roof. Because something changed after Matthew's death. Marcus became distant, drank more, came home late, spoke to me with contempt. We argued about everything. I thought it was grief, that we were both broken, that mourning had turned us into bitter versions of ourselves. But there was something else, something I didn't know, something he kept as a dark secret for 8 years. And a year ago, dear listener, that secret came to light, and when I heard it, something inside me died, and something worse was born in its place. But I'll tell you that in a moment, because what's coming now is the part that will chill your blood. The last years with Marcus were a silent hell. After Matthew's death, he changed completely. He was no longer the man who courted me at the factory. He was no longer the one who said he admired me. He became a bitter stranger who drank every night and blamed me for everything. Anything was a reason to fight. If the food was cold, if the house was dirty, if I spent all my time crying, if I visited Matthew's grave too much. He said I was obsessed with a dead person, that I needed to get over it, that years had passed and I was still drowning in the past. How could I not be drowning? He was my son, my only son, the only thing I had left of David. And now he was underground because of a damn cramp in a pool we should never have built. Marcus started coming home drunk several nights a week. Sometimes he didn't come home at all. He said he stayed at a friend's. I knew he was lying. He smelled of cheap perfume, of women, but I didn't care. I didn't feel anything for him anymore. I just tolerated him because I didn't have the strength for anything else. There were times when I thought about leaving him, about running away, about starting over somewhere else, but I had nowhere to go. My sisters lived far away. My mother had died. I had no money of my own. Marcus managed everything. The house was in his name, the accounts in his name. I only had a part-time job at a bakery that barely covered my expenses. I was trapped in a house that felt like a tomb, trapped with a man who despised me, trapped in a life I no longer wanted to live. One night, a year and 2 months ago, Marcus came home drunker than usual. It was about 2 inches the morning. I heard him stumble over the furniture, curse, open the fridge. I was in bed trying to sleep, or rather trying to make the hours pass. He staggered into the room. He collapsed onto the bed with his clothes on. He smelled of cheap liquor and vomit. I was disgusted. I turned my back to him. Then he started to speak, slurring his words, half laughing. He was saying things that made no sense, that he could finally breathe, that he no longer had to carry that burden, that 8 years was a long time to keep a secret. I asked him what he was talking about. He told me it was about Matthew, that Matthew had died 8 years ago, and what a relief. I felt my blood run cold. What a relief. That's what he had said. What a relief that my son was dead. I sat up in bed and asked him what the hell he had just said. He laughed, a drunken, slurred, horrible laugh, and he told me what a relief, that that brat was finally dead, that he no longer had to put up with him, that he no longer had to compete for my attention with a crying child. I yelled at him to shut up. How dared he speak about Matthew like that he was a bastard. I got out of bed, trembling with rage. He kept laughing, and then he said something that broke me in two. He said, "Besides, it wasn't even an accident." I froze. My legs wouldn't respond. The world blurred. I asked him what he had said. "Repeat it," I told him. "Repeat what you just said." He sat up in bed, swaying. He looked at me with those glazed, drunken eyes, and he said it. He said it clearly. He said he killed Matthew. He said that Saturday when I went to the supermarket, Matthew was swimming in the pool, that he went down, that he told him to get out, that Matthew replied he would in a bit, that he got angry, that he was tired of that brat not obeying him, that he got into the water, grabbed Matthew by the neck, and held his head under the water. He said Matthew thrashed, tried to break free. Bubbles came out of his mouth, that he looked into his eyes as he drowned, that Matthew looked at him with terror, begging him to let go, and he didn't let go. He held him until he stopped moving, until the bubbles stopped, until his body went limp. Then he let go, got out of the pool, changed his clothes, sat on the patio to wait for me, and when I arrived, he acted as if nothing had happened, as if he had just found the body floating. He said it all in that slurred, drunken voice, as if he were telling me he had gone to the bank, as if it were nothing. Dear listener, I don't know how to describe what I felt at that moment. It was as if my soul had been torn from my body, as if everything I was, everything I had been, disintegrated. I screamed at him. I asked him why he had killed my son, my baby, my innocent child, and he gave me the most horrible reason imaginable. He said it was because he was tired of sharing me, that I paid more attention to Matthew than to him, that it was always Matthew this, Matthew that he got tired of being second, that he wanted it to be just him and me, that Matthew was a nuisance. I hit him. I slapped him, punched him. I cried. I screamed. I told him he was a monster, that he was a murderer, that I was going to go to the police, that he was going to rot in jail. He laughed again. He told me I couldn't prove anything, that 8 years had passed, that the case was closed, that the autopsy said accidental drowning, that no one would believe me, that I was a crazy old woman obsessed with her dead son. He said he had already said it, that he had finally gotten that weight off his chest, that he no longer cared if I knew or not. Anyway, I couldn't do anything. He turned over and fell asleep, snoring as if nothing had happened. I stayed sitting on the floor of that room for hours, crying, trembling, processing what I had just heard. My husband had murdered my son. He had drowned him with his own hands out of jealousy, out of the sick jealousy of a selfish man who couldn't bear to share his wife with a child. And for 8 years I had lived with that truth. For 8 years he consoled me, knowing that he himself had caused my pain. For 8 years he acted, lied. Let me think it was an accident. That night, something changed in me. I was no longer Denise. I was no longer the woman I had been. I became something else, something cold, calculating, dark. That night I decided that Marcus was going to pay, that I didn't care how long it took. I didn't care how, but he was going to pay for what he did to my son. And I ask you a favor, dear listener, before I continue. If this story is stirring something in you, if it's touching your soul, like this video, subscribe to the channel, press that black button that says subscribe. Help more stories like mine be heard. This channel gives a voice to incarcerated women. Women who have something to say, something that needs to be told, because what's coming now, dear friend, will shake your heart. It will make you wonder what you would do in my place, if you would be capable of what I was capable of. The next morning, Marcus woke up with a terrible hangover. He remembered nothing of what he had said. Nothing. He asked me why he had scratches on his face. I told him he had fallen while drunk. He ate breakfast in silence and went to work. I stayed at home, sitting in the living room, staring into space, processing, thinking. I should go to the police. I thought about it. I went to the station that same afternoon. I spoke with an officer. I told him what Marcus had confessed to me. The officer listened with a pitying face. When I finished, he told me that without evidence, they couldn't do anything. That a drunk's confession 8 years later was not evidence, that the case was closed as an accidental death, that I would need physical evidence, witnesses, something concrete. I asked if they could exhume the body. He said I needed a court order, and for that, I needed proof that a crime had been committed. It was a vicious circle. I needed proof to reopen the case, but to get proof, I needed to reopen the case. I left that station knowing that justice would do nothing, that Marcus was right. There was no way to prove it. He had won, or so he thought. The following days, I was like a zombie. I feigned normalcy, prepared his food, washed his clothes, slept in the same bed, but inside, I was burning. Every time I looked at him, I saw the hands that held my son's head underwater. Every time he spoke to me, I heard his drunken confession. Every time he snored beside me, I imagined Matthew kicking, drowning, dying in terror. Marcus remained the same, drinking, coming home late, treating me with contempt. He didn't even remember telling me anything. And I didn't remind him. I stayed silent, waiting. Waiting for what? I didn't know at first, but little by little an idea began to form in my head. If justice wasn't going to punish him, I would. I started planning in secret. In silence. While he drank, I thought. While he slept, I researched. I looked online for ways to kill without leaving a trace. Poisons, accidents, everything. But everything left evidence. Everything could be traced. And I didn't want to go to prison for something poorly done. If I was going to do this, I had to be sure. Then I remembered something. Marcus always fell asleep in the car when he came home very drunk. Sometimes he stayed there all night in the garage with the doors closed. An idea formed, a horribly perfect idea. Fire. Fire leaves no evidence, or leaves so much evidence that everything gets confused. And Marcus always smoked in the car, always left the lighter lying around. There were always cigarettes, a drunk, a lighter, spilled gasoline. It could look like an accident. But I didn't want it to look like an accident. I no longer wanted him to know. I wanted him to understand in his last seconds that this was for Matthew. I bought 2 jerry cans of gasoline, hid them in the basement. Marcus never went down there. For months they sat there waiting, and I waited too, waiting for the perfect opportunity. Months passed, 8 months since the confession. I continued to pretend, continued to be the submissive wife, but inside, I was ready. Every day I checked the jerry cans, made sure they were full. I rehearsed every step, every movement in my mind, until that night came. 11 months ago, a Friday, Marcus arrived at 11 at night completely drunk, drunker than ever. He could barely walk. I saw him arrive through the window. He drove the car into the garage, tried to get out, couldn't. He stayed there, slumped in the seat. This was my chance. I waited an hour to make sure he was completely unconscious. I went down to the basement, brought up the 2 jerry cans of gasoline, put on gloves, opened the door connecting the house to the garage. There he was snoring, mouth open, smelling of cheap liquor. The man who killed my son. I opened the first can. The smell of gasoline filled the garage. I started spraying it on the car, inside the car, on him, on his clothes, his face, his hair. I bathed him in gasoline. He moved a little, mumbled something, but didn't wake up. He was too drunk. I opened the second can, spilled gasoline all over the garage floor. I made a path from the car to the door so the fire would spread quickly, so there would be no escape. When I finished, I stood there looking at him. I thought of Matthew, of his laughter, of his drawings, of how he hugged me when he was scared, of his eyes full of terror as this monster drowned him. I took out the matchbox, the one we always kept in the kitchen for when the power went out. I took out a match, struck it against the box. The orange flame illuminated my face. I felt the heat in my hand. For a second I hesitated, a second where I thought about what I was about to do, that there was no turning back, that this would change me forever. But then I remembered the confession. I heard him say that Matthew was a nuisance, that he held him underwater until he stopped kicking, and I threw the match. The fire exploded instantly. Violent. Beautiful. The flames engulfed everything in seconds. The car, the floor, him. Marcus woke up screaming the most horrible screams I have ever heard in my life. Screams of pure pain, of terror, of desperation. He tried to open the door, but I had locked all the locks from the outside. He hit the windows, he writhed, he burned. And I stood there on the other side of the door, watching, not moving a muscle, not helping him, not calling anyone, watching him burn alive, just as he watched my son drown. The screams lasted about 5 minutes, maybe less, maybe more. Time became strange. The flames grew, smoke filled the garage, the heat was unbearable, but I didn't move. When the screams stopped, I left the house. I sat at the entrance. I waited. The neighbors had already called the fire department. I heard the sirens approaching. My neighbor, Brenda, ran out of her house, yelling at me to get away, that the fire could explode. I didn't move. I just sat there, calm. The firefighters arrived, put out the fire, went into the garage, removed what was left of Marcus, a black, unrecognizable, smoking body. The police arrived and asked me questions. I told them the truth. The whole truth. That I had done it. That I had doused him with gasoline. That I had lit the match. That I had left him to die. They asked me why. I told them about the confession, about Matthew's murder, about the 8 years of lies. They handcuffed me, took me to the station. Interrogations for hours. They wanted me to say it had been a fit of rage, that I had gone crazy with grief. My public defender begged me to say that it would help reduce my sentence. But I didn't say that. I told the truth, that I had planned it for months, that I waited for the perfect moment, that I did it consciously, that I knew exactly what I was doing. The prosecutor asked for life. The defense asked for 20 years for a crime of passion. The judge gave me life without parole, murder with premeditation, malice, and extreme cruelty. I accepted the sentence without saying anything because she was right. It was premeditated, it was malicious, and yes, it was cruel, but no more cruel than holding a 1-2-year-old boy's head underwater until he stopped fighting for his life. Here I am, 11 months later in this cell, serving life without any future beyond these walls, and I don't regret it. The trial was a media circus. The press seized on the story as if it were a novel. The woman who burned her husband alive for revenge. The headlines were scandalous. Some painted me as a monster, others as a victim who exploded. No one knew what to make of me. My family was divided. My sister, Gloria, supported me. She came to all the hearings, cried in the courtroom. She said Marcus was a murderer, that I did justice, but my other sister never spoke to me again. She said I was a criminal, that 2 deaths wouldn't bring Matthew back, that I had stained the family name. Marcus's family asked for the maximum penalty. His sister gave a speech at the trial about how he was a good man, an honest worker, how I had manipulated and murdered him in cold blood. She cried, saying that Marcus had no chance to defend himself, that I burned him alive like an animal. She was right about that. He had no chance to defend himself, just as Matthew had no chance to defend himself when he drowned him. What surprised me most was the public's reaction when the news broke about Marcus's confession, about Matthew's murder. Opinion was divided. Many online comments said, I did well, that any mother would do the same, that Marcus deserved to die that way. Others said I was a murderer, that I should have let justice act, that now Matthew has neither a mother nor a stepfather. Both are right. I am a murderer, but I am also a mother who avenged her son. In prison, the other inmates treat me differently. Some respect me. Say I did what many dare not. Others avoid me. Say I'm crazy, that I'm dangerous. The guards watch me closely. They say someone capable of burning a person alive is unpredictable. Maybe I am. I spend my days thinking, reliving everything. Sometimes I regret how I did it, not having done it, but how. The screams, the smell, the image of his burned body, that stayed with me. I see it when I close my eyes. I hear it in my nightmares. But then I think of Matthew. I think of his last moments, of the terror he felt, of how Marcus looked at him as he drowned him, of how my boy kicked, swallowed water, drowned, feeling that no one would save him. And then I no longer regret it. I no longer feel anything but satisfaction, because Marcus felt a fraction of what Matthew felt, and that has to count for something. 2 months ago I received a letter. It was from Perpetua, my best friend my whole life. Her name is the same as my sentence. It was always a source of jokes between us. She's British, married a Colombian, and stayed here. She was the only one who visited me in these 11 months. In the letter, she told me that she went to visit Matthew's grave, that she took him flowers, that she talked to him, that she told him I avenged him, that his death did not go unpunished, that the monster who killed him paid. She told me Matthew would be proud of me. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if my boy would approve of what I did. Maybe he would look at me with horror. Maybe he would tell me it wasn't worth it, that he was already at peace, that he didn't need revenge. Or maybe he would say, thank you. Thank you for not leaving him forgotten. Thank you for doing justice when no one else did. I'll never know. What I do know is that Marcus is gone. He can't hurt anyone else. He can't lie, manipulate, kill anymore. His last day on this earth was full of pain, and that gives me peace. A cold, empty peace, but peace nonetheless. Dear listener, if you've made it this far, thank you. I know my story is tough. I know it's violent. I know there are parts that are hard to digest, but I needed to tell it. I needed someone to know that behind every sensational headline, there's a person, a story, a pain that cannot be put into words. There are those who say that revenge is useless, that it doesn't bring back the dead, that it only creates more pain. And they are right. Marcus is dead, but Matthew is still dead too. Nothing changed, except that now both are underground. But for me, something did change. For 8 years, I carried the guilt of Matthew's death. I thought it was my fault, that if I hadn't gone to the supermarket, if I had been there, if I had noticed something strange. Now I know it wasn't my fault. It was Marcus's. It was all Marcus's. And although Matthew won't come back, at least now I know the truth. And the culprit paid. That has to mean something. People ask me if I'm afraid of dying here, if I'm terrified of spending the rest of my life in this cell. And the truth is, I'm not. I already died 8 years ago when I buried my son. I died a year ago when I heard the confession. What I am doing now is not living. It is just existing, waiting. Waiting for the day I can see Matthew again. Waiting for the day I can hug him. Ask him for forgiveness for not protecting him, for trusting the wrong man, for not seeing the signs, and ask him if I did well, if avenging him was worth it, if he is proud or disappointed. Until then, I'm here in this cell with his photo under my pillow, telling him every night what happened during the day, just like I used to when he was little. If this story impacted you, if it made you feel something, I ask you to like this video, subscribe to the channel, share, comment, say whether you would do the same or not. This channel gives a voice to women like me, incarcerated women with stories that need to be told. Forgive me if the video was too long, but these stories cannot be told halfway. Forgive me if it was confusing in some parts. There are details I omit due to my legal situation. Forgive me if it stirred things in you, but I needed to vent. I needed someone to know. Thank you for listening. Thank you for not turning off the video halfway. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to tell my side. And remember, dear friend, sometimes justice doesn't come. Sometimes monsters go free. Sometimes mothers have to become executioners for their children to rest in peace. It's not always right, but sometimes it's necessary. Take care of your children. Protect them. Believe them. Don't make my mistakes. Don't trust blindly. Don't ignore the signs, because when it's too late, all you have left is revenge. And revenge, though sweet, never fills the void. Goodbye. And Matthew, wherever you are, this was for you, my love.